The first thing Haley Adiino did when she arrived in Seoul was accidentally insult a security guard, get adopted by a street cat, and order what she thought was spicy chicken soup but turned out to be something that made her cry for 45 minutes in a CU convenience store bathroom. She considered this a great start. Haley had come to Korea on a 2-year contract as a senior copywriter for Yonsei and Bach Creative Agency, a mid-sized firm that specialized in luxury brand campaigns. She was 28, sharp-tongued, chronically overqualified, and had packed 3 extra suitcases of hair products because she was not, under any circumstances, navigating Korean humidity without her routine. Her mother had called her reckless. Her best friend Zara had called her brave. Her ex-boyfriend had said she'd be back in 3 months, and that alone had been enough motivation to sign the contract in permanent ink. Seoul received her like a city that didn't know what was coming. She lived in a bright, slightly chaotic apartment in Mapogu, decorated with plants she kept accidentally killing and reviving, a cork board of campaign ideas, and a handwritten sign above her bathroom mirror that said, "You are that girl. Act accordingly." She ate tteokbokki for breakfast when she was happy and ramen at midnight when she was stressed. And she had already memorized the name of every grandma at the market near her building because they gave her extra portions and called her the tall, pretty one. Life was good, loud, overstimulating, occasionally confusing, but good. It was a Tuesday in late October when everything changed, though Haley would later tell the story and insist it started on a Wednesday because Tuesdays felt too ordinary for something this dramatic. She had been walking back from a client pitch, heels in hand, locks piled on top of her head, blazer slung over one arm, and an iced Americano in the other, when she turned a corner near Hangang Park and nearly walked directly into a wheelchair. "Oh!" She stumbled, grabbed a nearby bench to stop herself, and somehow still managed not to spill her coffee. A miracle. A genuine miracle. The man in the wheelchair stared up at her with the most unreadable expression she had ever seen in her life. He was, and she would not lie to herself about this, not even for dignity's sake, extraordinarily handsome. Structured jaw, dark eyes with an almost unsettling depth to them, broad shoulders filling out a slate-gray coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was slightly overgrown, like he'd missed a barber appointment and hadn't cared enough to reschedule. He had a book in his lap, Camus, The Stranger, Naturally, and a thermos beside him, and he looked like the human embodiment of, I have everything and feel nothing. He also looked like he had not smiled in approximately 4 years. "You should watch where you're walking," he said. His English was precise, clipped, accented just enough to be distracting. Haley blinked. Then she looked at her unspoiled coffee, then back at him. "You should get a bell," she said. A pause. The wind moved through the park. A child screamed happily somewhere in the distance. "Excuse me, a little bell, like bikes have, so people know you're coming." She gestured vaguely at his wheelchair. "For safety." He stared at her with an expression that suggested he was deciding whether to be offended or baffled and hadn't landed yet. "That is the most." "I'm not being rude," she said quickly. "I almost spilled my coffee. This is my 3rd one today and I've already hit my budget. I'm just saying, as a pedestrian who nearly became a casualty, a small bell would benefit everybody." She paused. "Also, I'm sorry for almost stepping on you. Are you okay?" He looked down at himself as if checking. "I'm fine." "Good." She fixed her blazer. "I'm Haley." Another pause. Longer this time. "Seo Do-hyun. Cool name." She pointed at his book. "How's the existential dread going?" Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. More like his face had received a memo about smiling and was still processing the paperwork. "It's Camus. I know what it is. I read it in college and spent 2 weeks questioning everything, including whether I should change my major. I didn't." She tucked her heels under her arm. "You come here often? That's a real question, not a line." Do-hyun looked at her for a long moment. She got the sense he was not used to being spoken to like this. Not rudely, just directly, casually, like he was a regular person sitting in a park rather than whatever complicated, expensive, solitary thing he clearly was. "Sometimes," he said carefully. "Same. I live nearby. I walk here after bad pitches." She looked out at the river. Today's was a disaster. The client wanted bold and innovative, but rejected everything that was actually bold or innovative, so she shrugged. Han Gang gets me. He said nothing, but he also didn't leave, and his hands, she noticed, had relaxed slightly on the armrests of his chair. They sat, one on the bench, one beside it, in what should have been an awkward silence but was somehow not. The river moved. The sky went from orange to violet. Haley finished her coffee and crushed the cup in her hand, then immediately looked for a bin. "There's one by the path," Do-hyun said quietly. "Thank you." She stood, walked over, tossed it, came back, sat down again without asking permission, because why would she ask permission to sit on a public bench? "Do you live near here too? Or?" "No." A pause. "I drove. Alone." "Yes." She glanced at his chair, then at him, not with pity. He clocked the difference, and something in him settled because of it. She was just curious. "Adaptive car?" "Yes." "Okay, that's genuinely impressive. I still can't parallel park a regular one." She propped her chin on her hand. "What do you do, Seo Do-hyun?" He seemed to consider how to answer this. "Business," he said finally. "Wow, very specific, thank you." She grinned when he gave her a flat look. Okay. Mysterious businessman by the river. I can respect that." She stood and gathered herself, checked the time on her phone. "I have to go feed my probably dead succulent and pretend it still has a chance. It was nice almost running into you." She had turned to leave when he said very quietly, "Same time next week, perhaps." Haley turned around. He was looking at his book again, a practiced sort of nonchalance that didn't quite land because his jaw was set just a little too tight. She smiled at the back of his head. "I'll bring better coffee," she said, and walked away. She did come back, and so did he. It became a thing before either of them acknowledged it was a thing. Every Tuesday, she'd been right about the day after all. At the park, her with her iced Americano and her running commentary on life and soul, him with Camus or Dostoevsky or the occasional business journal he pretended he wasn't stressed about. She talked. He listened in that precise, focused way of his, like she was a puzzle he'd decided to quietly enjoy solving. Sometimes he responded with dry one-liners that made her genuinely cackle. Sometimes he asked her questions carefully, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be curious about someone. She learned things about him in pieces. He was 33. He'd lost the use of his legs in an accident at 25. A crash, he said, and didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. He had studied economics in the UK, spoke 4 languages, and had a brain that moved like water over stone. Smooth, constant, inevitable. He had been back in Korea for 5 years and spent most of it, she gathered, alone. "You don't seem like someone with no friends," she told him one afternoon. "I have contacts," he said. "Associates. People who call when they need something. That's not friends. That's a LinkedIn network." She stirred her drink. "What happened to actual friends?" He looked at the river. "People become uncomfortable," he said, in the same tone you'd used to state that the sky was gray. Factual, unsurprised, not quite resigned. After the accident, they didn't know where to look. Haley made a noise that was deeply unimpressed. "People are cowards." He looked at her then, startled. "Like genuinely. That is a them problem, not a you problem." She said it so matter-of-factly, so free of performance, that he didn't know what to do with it. Their discomfort was never your responsibility to manage. They should be embarrassed. Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. "You're very opinionated. Always. Want another one?" She gestured at the river. "That man over there has been feeding the same duck for 20 minutes. I think he's lonely. I think he's going to name the duck. I think the duck knows." He followed her gaze, and he laughed. A real one, short and involuntary, like it surprised him, and Haley filed it away like treasure. She met Yoon Jae-won, Do-hyun's driver and only consistent human contact, on the 4th Tuesday, when it rained unexpectedly and the man appeared with an umbrella for each of them without being asked. "Does he just carry spares?" Haley asked. "He prepares for everything," Do-hyun said. "I like him." She waved at Jae-won, who bowed and looked mildly panicked. "Has he always worked for you?" "Since I was 26. "So he's the friend," she said. Do-hyun opened his mouth, closed it. "He would be insulted by that." I'm going to ask him. She turned. J1SSI. Are you his friend or just his employee? J1 stared at her with the expression of a man whose job had suddenly gotten extremely complicated. Both, he said diplomatically, and shot Do-hyun a look that said, who is this woman and when did you get a her? She didn't know about the family for 2 months. Oh, she knew he came from money. That was obvious, the car alone, the coat, the way he held silence. Like someone accustomed to rooms bending around him. But the full picture didn't arrive until a Tuesday when Do-hyun showed up 20 minutes late. Jaw tight, eyes flat in a way she'd learned meant something had happened. Not that he'd tell her. She said nothing at first. Just handed him the second coffee she'd bought. Black, no sugar, she'd learned, and waited. After a few minutes, my brother called. Okay. He wants me to sign over my shares in the company to a subsidiary trust. His voice was completely level. In exchange for, as he put it, continued access to family resources. Haley turned to look at him very slowly. Continued what? They believe, Do-hyun said, like he was reading from a document he found mildly distasteful, that my capacity to contribute meaningfully to the business is. He paused, chose the word with surgical precision. Limited. Haley stared at him. He glanced over. Don't what? Whatever you're about to say. I'm about to say, she said, that your family sounds like the kind of people who would lose to me in an argument and then go home and be mad about it for a year. She turned back to the river. I'd like to meet them. Absolutely not. Do-hyun. She looked at him fully, and her voice dropped the humor and went somewhere steadier. You know what they're telling you is a lie, right? He said nothing. I'm serious. Look at me. She waited until he did, and when he did, she held the eye contact without flinching. You are the smartest, most perceptive person I have met in this entire country, and I have met a lot of people. Whatever story they've been telling you about your worth, it's not real. It was never real. They're just scared of you. She tilted her head. And honestly, they should be. Do-hyun was quiet for a very long time. You don't know my family, he said. No, she agreed, settling back. But I know you. She picked up her coffee. He picked up his. They sat with that between them, warm and solid. And true, and watched the light fold into the Han River like it had nowhere better to be. His mother's name was Seo Young-suk, and she was the kind of beautiful that came from decades of very expensive maintenance and a total absence of warmth. She was 62, impeccably dressed at all times, and possessed the social smile of a woman who had perfected the art of saying you are beneath me without moving her lips. His eldest brother was Seo Dojin, 40, the golden son, the heir apparent, the one who had inherited their late father's business ruthlessness and none of his occasional humor. He was handsome in a polished corporate way and had the energy of a man who had never once doubted that every room he entered was already his. Then there was Seo Hae-sol, the sister, 37, who was technically the most neutral party but had spent so long performing loyalty to Dojin that she'd forgotten she had her own opinions. She wasn't malicious. She was just cowardly, which Haley would eventually determine was almost worse. And the aunt, Madame Seo Yoonja, Young-suk's older sister, who flew in from Busan specifically to be difficult and had elevated passive aggression to the level of performance art. Haley met them all at once. This was not planned. It happened because she had been walking up to Do-hyun's apartment building. Yes, they were at that stage now. She had been to his apartment. It was a beautiful, tastefully minimal space with too many books and suspiciously good coffee, when the family arrived for an unannounced visit. She turned the corner and nearly walked into a convoy of black vehicles. Do-hyun was in the lobby when they arrived. She was beside him, locks freshly retwisted and pinned up, wearing a burnt orange wrap dress and ankle boots, holding a Tupperware container of jollof rice she'd made because she'd made too much. The elevator doors opened. The Seo family materialized like a weather event. The silence was remarkable. Young-suk's eyes traveled over Haley from ankle boots to earrings with the efficiency of a scanner looking for contraband. Do-hyun, she said, not looking away from Haley. Who is this? This is Haley, Do-hyun said. His voice was even. His jaw was not. She's a friend. A friend, Dojin repeated, with the tone of a man who had heard the word friend, deployed to cover a multitude of inconveniences before. Yes, Haley shifted the Tupperware to her other hand and smiled at the family with the particular brightness of someone who has immediately clocked the full dynamics of a room and decided to be unbothered by them. Hi, I'm Haley Adino. Nice to meet you all. She looked at Youngsuk. You must be his mother, he mentioned you. A flicker in Youngsuk's eyes, uncertain whether that was a compliment. He mentioned me. He said you have excellent taste in interior design. This was true. Do-hyun had said this once, briefly, while she'd admired a photo of the family estate. It was enough. The estate photos are stunning. Youngsuk thawed precisely 3 degrees. Not enough to be warm, but enough to be civil. Yes, I oversaw the renovation myself. It shows. Haley looked at Dojin and extended her hand. And you're the older brother, right? Dojin. Dojin shook it marginally. You know about us. I know what Do-hyun tells me. She beamed. Which is that you're all very busy people. The subtext, too busy to visit regularly, apparently, went unspoken but landed anyway, because Haesol shifted uncomfortably and Do-hyun made a noise that was absolutely not a laugh. Yoonja, the aunt, was staring at the Tupperware. What is that? Jollof rice. Haley lifted it slightly. West African. I made too much and Do-hyun said he'd eat it. I'm Nigerian Kenyan, she added, before anyone could ask. The rice is very good. I have strong feelings about it. He eats that? Yoonja asked, turning to Do-hyun. He said it was the best thing he'd had in months, Haley said pleasantly. But I think he was being polite. Or maybe not. He asked for it 3 times. Do-hyun did not confirm or deny this. He was watching her with something that looked very much like barely contained delight. The family relocated upstairs. Haley was invited, or more accurately, Do-hyun said come up, in a tone that did not allow argument, and she recognized the request underneath it. I need you in this room. So she came. The visit was ostensibly a family check-in. It was actually, Haley determined within 10 minutes, a pressure campaign. Youngsuk made 3 oblique references to the company restructuring. Dojin brought up the trust shares twice, both times in language carefully cleaned of direct accusation. Haesol said very little, which was its own form of complicity. Yoonja, for her part, mostly ate the jollof rice and then tried to look like she wasn't enjoying it. Haley sat beside Do-hyun and said nothing through the first 2 rounds. She was watching, learning the architecture, the ways they angled language, the micro-expressions, the particular cruelty of pretending concern. It was when Dojin said, with silken reasonableness, we're only thinking about what's most sustainable, given Do-hyun's circumstances. What circumstances? Haley asked. Everyone looked at her. Sorry. She wasn't sorry at all. I just want to make sure I understand. What specific circumstances are you referring to? Dojin looked at her the way one looks at a chair that has begun to speak. His situation. His wheelchair, she said clearly, because she had found that people who talked around things hated when you named the thing directly. You mean the wheelchair? Silence. Because I want to understand the logic, she continued pleasantly. Do-hyun runs how many portfolio companies right now? She looked at him. 4, he said quietly. 4. And the restructuring proposal was his idea, right? The one that added the new revenue stream. Yes. Great. So, she folded her hands. I'm just a copywriter, not a business person, so maybe I'm missing something. But it seems like the circumstances you're worried about aren't actually affecting performance. So what specifically is the concern? Youngsuk had gone very still. Dojin's face did something complicated. You don't understand how family businesses work. I don't, she agreed, all warmth. But I understand people. And I'm getting the sense that this conversation isn't really about the business. Which is fine, family stuff is complex. I just don't think Do-hyun should be asked to sign away assets based on a concern nobody's willing to actually name out loud. The room was profoundly, magnificently silent. Yoonja set down her fork. Do-hyun was looking at the wall with the expression of a man choosing not to look at the woman beside him because if he did, he would lose all composure. Dojin cleared his throat. This is a private family matter. You're right, Haley said. I shouldn't have jumped in. I apologize. She smiled at him. I just really like him. Another silence. This one different, softer, somewhere. Young-suk's eyes moved between her son and this woman. Something changed in them, though she would have fought you before admitting what. The meeting ended shortly after. The family left in the same convoy of black vehicles. At the door, Yoonja turned to Haley and said, begrudgingly, in Korean, that rice was acceptable. Which Hae-won, the housekeeper, translated while trying not to smile. Tell her I'll send the recipe, Haley said. It escalated, of course, because Haley kept coming around, and Do-hyun kept wanting her there. And the family kept showing up for their pressure campaigns and kept encountering her like an extremely cheerful obstacle they hadn't planned for. There was the time Dojin arrived to discuss strategy and Haley was at the dining table with spreadsheets she'd printed for a brand pitch. And Do-hyun had said, I'm in a meeting, give us a few hours. A meeting? And Dojin had stood there recalibrating for 3 full seconds. There was the time Young-suk called and Haley answered. Because Do-hyun's hands were covered in the sauce she was teaching him to make. And she just said, hello, Mrs. Seo. He'll be right there in flawless polite Korean she'd been practicing. And Young-suk had gone completely quiet for 5 seconds before saying you speak Korean and Haley had said I'm learning. I'm at intermediate. Please be patient with me and something in Young-suk's voice had shifted just slightly, the way ice does right before it decides whether to crack or hold. There was the legendary incident with Yoonja, in which the aunt arrived with what she clearly considered a devastating topic. A woman came to me about Do-hyun, a surgeon's daughter, very eligible from a proper family, and Haley, who had been eating grapes on the couch with exactly zero awareness that she was supposed to be intimidated, had looked up and said, does she know his coffee order? And Yoonja had said, what? And Haley had said, it's a great metric for how well you actually know someone. His is black, 45 seconds of cooling. Then the first sip. You should ask her. And then she'd gone back to her grapes while Do-hyun pressed his hand over his mouth in the kitchen. You're doing it on purpose, he told her after. Doing what? She asked, the picture of innocence. You know what? But he was smiling, a real one which was becoming less rare now, like something that had been closed for a long time was opening in careful increments. You're not afraid of them. Why would I be afraid of them? Genuine curiosity. Most people are. She considered this. I think they count on that, she said. It's how they maintain the structure. Everyone's too scared to say the obvious thing. So the obvious thing never gets said, and they just keep. She waved a hand. Operating in the gap. She looked at him. The obvious thing, by the way, is that you are exceptional and they are wasting you. Do-hyun looked at her for a long time. You say things like that very casually, he said. Because it's true, she said simply. Truth should be casual. It's lies that need all the ceremony. He reached over, slowly, and tucked a loose lock behind her ear. The first time he'd touched her hair, a deliberate thing, something asked and answered in the same gesture. She didn't move. Haley, he said. Do-hyun, she said back. This is getting complicated. It was always going to be complicated. She turned to face him fully. I just don't think it should be avoided because of that. He looked at her for a long time, searching for the condition in it, the hesitation, the but, and found none. My family will be awful, he said. Your family has already been awful, she said. I'm still here, he exhaled. Then he reached out and took her hand, carefully, like she was something real he needed to verify. She let him. Outside, Seoul moved and shimmered and hummed, indifferent and beautiful, not caring at all about the fact that something enormous was quietly beginning in a 6th-floor apartment in Mapogu between a man who had stopped expecting to be chosen and a woman who had never once considered that he wouldn't be. The Hanseong Group annual gala was, by any measure, the event of the Korean business calendar. Held every November at the Grand Hyatt Seoul, it was 300 of the country's wealthiest families in a ballroom, doing the performance of legacy with extraordinary commitment. It was black tie. It was catered by a Michelin-starred kitchen. It was the kind of event where every conversation was an asset negotiation wearing the costume of small talk. Do-hyun had not attended in 4 years. The official story, maintained by the family's PR architecture, was that he was focusing on independent ventures. The real story, the one that lived in whispered conversations between Dojin and their mother, was that they had, gently, suggested he might find it uncomfortable. Too many stairs in the old venue. Too much attention. Too much explaining. He had not pushed back. He'd simply stopped expecting to be included. Until 6 days before the gala, when Haley found the printed invitation on his desk. Technically addressed to the CO family, his name conspicuously absent from the handwritten note attached. And she'd looked at it for a very long moment, and then she'd looked at him and she'd said, "We're going. I wasn't invited specifically. The invitation says CO family. You are a CO. You are family. We're going. Haley, do you want to go?" Pause. "Yes," he said quietly. "Then we're going." She set the invitation down. "And we're going to look extraordinary." Yoon Jae-won, when informed of the plan, asked 0 questions and immediately began researching Grand Hyatt accessibility and parking logistics. This was why Do-hyun had kept him for 7 years. Haley spent 4 days on her outfit with the intensity of someone preparing for battle, because she understood clearly without drama that this was in fact a battle. Not a violent one, not even a hostile one technically, but a battle of presence, of legitimacy, of walking into a room that had been carefully arranged to exclude someone and refusing to acknowledge the arrangement. She wore deep emerald, a floor-length gown, structured at the shoulders, with a neckline that was elegant and not conservative and a train that moved like it had opinions. Her locks were pinned up with gold fixtures, several loose ones framing her face. Her jewelry was minimal and expensive. A thin gold choker and earrings Zara had sent from London specifically for a moment. She'd said, "You'll know it when you get to it." This was it. Do-hyun wore black on black, a custom-fitted suit that his tailor had done in 3 days on accelerated timeline without complaint. Because when Haley Atieno said it needs to be perfect, people apparently understood that she meant it. He wore a single gold pin at his lapel, small, the shape of the Korean character for enough, something Haley had found at a market and given him 3 weeks ago without explanation and then explained with, "I just thought you should have a reminder." He had worn it every day since. They arrived at 8:20, which was perfectly, deliberately not early. Jae-won pulled up to the entrance. A valet came. The accessible entrance was to the side. Properly marked, well-maintained, the Grand Hyatt did not mess around with logistics, and Do-hyun transferred from the car with the practiced ease of a man who had stopped finding this moment noteworthy. Because Haley had never once made it noteworthy, and people tend to take their cues from the most confident person in their radius. She walked beside him through the entrance. The lobby was all warm light and flowers, and the low hum of 300 people informal were performing importance at each other. Heads turned as they came in. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough, in the way that beautiful things with good timing tend to draw eyes. Haley was smiling at something Jae-won had said. Do-hyun was speaking quietly to her, and she tilted her head to listen. And to anyone watching, they looked like the most natural thing in the room. 2 people entirely comfortable in each other's gravity. The Seo family was at a center table when they came in. Dojin saw them first. Haley watched his face from 20 feet away and catalogued it with the precision she applied to everything. The first expression, unguarded, which was shock. The second, which was something almost like the word she reached for was caught. And then the performance settled over it like a mask. Composed, unreadable. The face of a man deciding how to recontextualize something unexpected. Young-suk's reaction was more contained and therefore more interesting. She went very still, and then her gaze moved over Haley with the same scanning efficiency as the first time, and it landed differently this time, because this time Haley was not a puzzle or an inconvenience or a question. She was an arrival. Yoonja, bless her, simply said audibly to the woman beside her. She wore green, as if green were a declaration of war. It was. Do-hyun steered toward the family table, because of course he did. He had never been someone who avoided, only someone who had been taught to make himself small enough to become invisible. That lesson, Haley had been quietly uninstalling for months. "Mother," he said as they reached the table. His voice was calm and even and utterly uninterested in anyone's feelings about his presence. "Dojin, Haesol, Yama Yoonja." "Do-hyun," Young-suk said. "A beat. We didn't expect you to come." Haley suggested it. He glanced at her. "It's such a beautiful event," Haley said warmly, making eye contact with Young-suk like she was genuinely delighted to be here, which she was, just for different reasons than they'd prefer. "I've heard about it for ages. Do-hyun's described all of you at these events and I wanted to see it in person." "He described us," Dojin said. He said you're all very good at working a room. Serene smile. I can see it. Dojin opened his mouth. Closed it. This was going to be a long evening. Haley, it turned out, was extraordinary at galas. Not in spite of being an outsider, but almost because of it. She had no score to settle, no legacy to perform, no hierarchy to navigate carefully. She was just a person who liked people and was very good at reading them, and those two things together in a room full of carefully maintained social architecture was, it turned out, devastating. She talked to a semiconductor heiress about Instagram algorithms, which the heiress found hilarious and refreshing. She talked to an elderly chairman about his late wife's recipe for DeKalb, which he'd mentioned offhandedly, and which Haley had immediately asked about with such genuine interest that he'd spent 20 minutes showing her photos. She talked to 3 different CEOs' wives about K-drama recommendations, and within 40 minutes had accidentally built a small informal table of women who were more entertaining than the official program. And through all of it, she kept one hand close to Do-hyun. Not on him, not hovering, not protective in the way that implied he needed protecting. Just near. Available. A consistent fact of the room that said I'm here because I choose to be here, and that choice is the simplest thing in the world. People noticed. People talked to him, approached the table, reintroduced themselves, asked about the subsidiary ventures, mentioned they'd read his analysis piece in the industry journal. He responded with the sharp, unhurried intelligence she had always known was there, waiting to be given a room where it didn't have to apologize for itself. The Seo family watched this from their table with several different flavors of complicated. Dojin left twice, which Haley noted. He came back both times looking like he'd been having private conversations, recalibrating. Haesol, interestingly, got up around 9:30 and came to sit beside Haley at the auxiliary table. She'd accidentally curated and just stayed. Didn't say much at first, but she laughed at something one of the CEO wives said, and then at something Haley said, and something in her posture gradually unodded. Yoonja was at the main table, strategically positioned to monitor all developments, eating the gala appetizers with the expression of a woman who had come prepared for a different outcome. The reckoning came at 9:45. It came in the form of director Baek Junhyung, 68, white-haired, the senior non-family member of the Hanseong Group Board, who had known the CEO patriarch for 30 years. He found Do-hyun at the edge of the room where they'd retreated briefly, a quieter pocket, and he shook his hand with both of his and said, I haven't seen you at one of these in years. I'm glad you came. So am I, Do-hyun said. Baek's eyes moved to Haley. This must be the woman I've been hearing about tonight. Haley blinked. You've been hearing about me? Half this room has been asking about the woman in green who made Chairman Han cry talking about his wife. He was smiling. In a good way. Oh. She glanced at Do-hyun, who looked extremely unsurprised. That was a good conversation. He said, and here Baek quoted the old chairman with obvious fondness. She listened like the story mattered. He turned back to Do-hyun. Your father would have liked her. The space that opened up in Do-hyun at that sentence was enormous and silent and briefly, clearly visible. Haley took his hand under the edge of the table, quiet and certain. I would have liked to meet him, she said. Dojin found them at 10:30. He came alone, which was the tell, no Youngsuk, no Haesol, no Yoonja as flank. Just Dojin, who had clearly spent the last 90 minutes watching his brother navigate a room with complete authority and ease, and was now doing the arithmetic of what he'd been wrong about. Can I speak with you? He said to Do-hyun. Then, after a pause, to Haley. Both of you. They found a small private seating area off the main hall. Dojin sat. They sat. There was a long moment. Director Baek, Dojin said carefully, asked me tonight if Do-hyun would consider a board advisory role. Silence. He said the family has been underusing him. Dojin said it like the words cost something. He said it directly. Do-hyun was very still. I don't know, Dojin continued. When we stopped, I don't know when the decision was made. He looked at his brother. Not with apology exactly, the CEOs did not do apology easily, but with something that was at least its honest precursor. I don't have a good answer for it. No, Do-hyun agreed quietly. You don't. Dojin's jaw worked. Then he looked at Haley. You've been, he paused, protective of him. He doesn't need my protection, she said. He just needed someone in his corner who wasn't keeping score. A silence. The trust proposal, Dojin said. I'll retract it. Do-hyun was quiet. I'm not asking you to forgive 4 years in one conversation, Dojin said. He stopped. Something crossed his face, real and unglamorous. He's my brother. Do-hyun looked at him for a long time. Then he said very simply, then act like it. Dojin nodded. Once. Tight and true. Haley looked at her lap and thought, this is what it looks like. Not the big tearful reconciliation scene. Just 2 men and 1 sentence and a door that was closed deciding to open. Back in the ballroom they danced. There was a slow number. Haley had not expected Do-hyun to want to, and she hadn't suggested it. He'd looked at the floor and then at her and said, I can lead from here if you're willing to adapt. I am famously adaptable, she said. So they danced. She standing. He wheeled. Her hand in his other hand at her waist. Moving in the small, unhurried orbit of people who have found each other's rhythm and are content to stay in it. It was not conventional. It was also unambiguously the best thing happening. In that ballroom, and several people stopped talking to watch without realizing they were doing it. Young-suk watched from the table. Haley couldn't read the expression and didn't try to. She was busy. She was dancing with Seo Do-hyun in a room that had spent years forgetting he existed, and he was looking at her with an expression she recognized now. The one where the paperwork about smiling had been approved and the smile had actually arrived, unperformed, uncomplicated, freely given. How are you feeling? She asked quietly. Strange, he said. Good strange or bad strange? He thought about it. The music moved. The lights made gold of everything. Like I've been in a room with the wrong map for a very long time, he said. And someone finally gave me the right one. Haley looked at him. The map was always right, she said. The room was just badly lit. He laughed, soft, real, the kind that didn't need an audience. You have a metaphor for everything. It's my greatest skill. I'd argue otherwise, he said, and his thumb traced a slow line across her knuckles. She felt that all the way up her arm and chose not to mention it because some things were better held than spoken, at least right now, in this room, in this song, on this night that had started as a statement and ended as something much quieter and far more permanent. Yoonja, at the table, was talking to one of the CEO wives. She had eaten 4 desserts. She had not said a critical thing about Haley in over an hour, which was, by Yoonja's metrics, a white flag of extraordinary proportions. J1, waiting by the car, got a text from Do-hyun that said simply, late night, don't worry. He put his phone in his pocket and smiled at nothing in particular. And Seoul turned and glittered outside the Grand Hyatt's tall windows, indifferent and magnificent, the way cities are, always containing, without comment, the most important moments of the lives moving through them. The Seo family never quite recovered. Their equilibrium after that night. Not because anything dramatic happened, no public confrontations, no thrown champagne, no tabloid headline. Just the quiet, irreversible rearrangement that happens when someone refuses to be erased and the people around them are slowly forced to see it. Dojin retracted the trust proposal by Monday. Haesol called Haley 2 weeks later and asked, somewhat desperately, if she wanted to get lunch. Haley said yes because Haesol was not malicious, and people who stop being cowardly deserve encouragement. Yoonja asked for the jollof rice recipe and then claimed she'd come up with improvements, which Haley found so funny she couldn't even be annoyed. And Young-suk. Young-suk looked at her youngest son one evening over dinner, really looked, in the way she hadn't in years, and said, she makes you sit differently. Do-hyun raised an eyebrow. Upright, his mother said. You used to fold. You don't anymore. He didn't say anything. But later that night he told Haley, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, she's not wrong. You were folding for them. You don't have to. I know, he said. I know you know, she said. I just like saying it. He looked at her across the table of his apartment with its books and its good coffee and the plants she'd brought over and somehow kept alive when his head died, and he thought, here is a person who arrived in my life like a weather event and stayed like a climate change. Haley, he said. Do-hyun, she said back. Thank you. She reached over and stole a piece of his food off his plate, as she had been doing for months without apology. Don't thank me, she said. Just keep being exactly who you are. He planned to, for a very long time.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that the wrong people will make you feel like a burden, the right person will make you feel like the whole point. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.